Women of Wyoming Then and Now is brought to you by the Wyoming Historical Society and supported in part by a grant from the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund, a program of the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. This program features unique female perspectives on events, themes, or narratives related to state history. We, the host, believe that one woman's action toward a better future can result in a greater legacy that inspires and equips many generations of women to come.
Welcome, I'm Leslie Waggener, today's host of Women of Wyoming Then and Now, a program brought to you by the Wyoming State Historical Society. So with us now is Janelle Molony, and she's going to tell us about a remarkable woman in Wyoming's history. And Janelle is an award-winning author and journalist with a particular passion for family histories. And that includes many of those linked to the Oregon and Overland-California trails passing through Wyoming. And her research using female eyewitness accounts has been instrumental in pinpointing new revelations about state history. And in fact, she is currently bringing to life her own ancestors' 1864 diary in a forthcoming historical fiction publication. So welcome, Janelle.
Thank you so much, Leslie. I'm super excited to be here and to share one of the incredible stories of a woman who transported her family through Wyoming in 1864. So I'm really excited to talk about what she saw and why her opinion is important and what we can learn from that.
Yeah, I'm excited too. This is such an interesting woman. And so can you briefly introduce the person and the document we're going to be talking about?
Right, yeah. So we're going to be looking at the 1864 journal of Miss Mary Ringo, which was published by her grandson. And this person, Mary Ringo, was coming through Wyoming from Liberty, Missouri. Her husband, Martin Ringo, was recently diagnosed with tuberculosis, and so very commonly the cure was to get to some dry, warm climate. There's also another parallel account I wanted to mention. Someone on the train wrote a letter back to a newspaper in Missouri to report on the more tragic events that occurred. So the story that and the quotes that I'm providing for you today have been well documented and well corroborated. So I found her diary when I was searching for my own great-great-great-grandmother's story. And I found it through papertrail.org, which is a highly recommended resource for those who are looking at trail diaries. And I was looking for anyone and everyone who was traveling on the trail at the same exact time, same place as my ancestor to get those well-rounded perspectives.
We want to hear about this fascinating woman.
Yeah, so Mary Ringo is 38 years old on the trip. She is born and raised in Missouri, good church girl, marries a farmer who fights in the Mexican-American War. She gives him 5 kids, and she's currently 3 to 4 months pregnant at the start of her trip. So by the time she gets to the end of her trip, she's heavily pregnant, which over the summer, as women, we know that is a challenge in of itself.
Yeah, even today, that's a challenge.
She does have what's considered a geriatric pregnancy, although I'm not certain what they did back then to tiptoe around it. In her diary, she mentions walking several hours a day.
Yeah.
So I don't want to walk several hours a day and I'm not pregnant. So just want to throw that out there. She's really hauling. And I have a picture of her from her published material from her grandson. And she's a cute lady. She's got her jewelry. She's got a fashionable outfit on for the 1860s. She's wearing the Victorian hair bun.
Yeah, and that was taken after the journey, I'm guessing.
I don't know. I mean, I'm 35. She looks older than me.
She does. She looks, I don't know, 40s, 50s. But it's hard to say because that woman had a hard life, and that can add some years to you.
Where are the wrinkles? So Her husband has tuberculosis, which is really sad. And back in the day, an untreated TB diagnosis gave you between 2 and 5 years until certain death. There's a lot of like that dream bucket list stuff happening on this trip. Her family is notable later because her oldest son, who's 14, is Johnny Ringo, who gets all mixed up with some Wild West icon outlaws, murderers, robbers, etc. He gets mixed up with the Jesse James and Cole Younger gangs who come and terrorize the West later on. So I think it's important to remember that her kiddo is about to go awry. So she's coming starting on May 18th. They are headed towards San Jose from Missouri, and there are 7 trains or 7 vehicles with them in their little train. They have 2 wagons with them. They had tons of furniture and books and heavy items, and they were bringing it all. I think, and with the help of other researchers, her husband is the wagon master as well. So she's in a position of semi-status on the trip.
Wow. So her husband, who was not feeling probably very well, this would have been hard on, I would guess, both of them. And in that time period, they weren't exactly youngsters doing this very difficult trek with 5 kids. Yeah, that's just amazing to me. The logistics of and the physical demands on them for this trip.
Definitely. We can probably relate if we've been on any kind of family road trips, even to go 2 hours away to the mountains or to the beach, not even 3 to 4 months away. And that's a lot, and a lot of pressure.
What was it like to be a wagon master and the wife of a wagon master?
She was very, very aware of where they needed to be, how fast they needed to be there, and all the points along the way. So I like that she's has a nice managerial tone sometimes.
Yeah, well, she had an insider's viewpoint on that, with her husband as the wagon master, that he was probably keeping the schedule and she was fully aware of that. So that's very interesting to have that perspective. So I am now really curious, and I'm sure our viewers are, to have you read an excerpt or 2 from Mary's diary. And if you could just kind of set that scene for us so we know what's going on.
For sure. I picked out 2 points that I think go really well for that answer. And I wanted to point out before that her diary is available through the Library of Congress digitally and free. So if anyone says, this is cool and I want to know more, you can get it for free. So I'm jumping in right when they enter Wyoming territory, or Idaho territory at that point. And it's July 16th that they cross the border. And at this time, the plains are in a torrential crisis. There's military on Indian, on immigrant violence that is stacked up. And we've just had a series of murders and massacres on the trail that have launched one of the largest defense initiatives of the military on the plains in all of the history of the Civil War. So the trail is now swarming with U.S. Army. People are very afraid, and not hypothetically afraid, like, oh, somebody got attacked somewhere, but it doesn't really happen. It's really happening now. So there's tension in the air. So 4 days before she got to Wyoming on July 12th, 50 miles north of Fort Laramie, the Fanny Keller and Sarah Larimer train was decimated by a rogue operation of Northern Plains Indians. And on that same day, across the river, my family's train was attacked. However, my family was being led by Nicholas Earp with all the boys. And Wild West historians can imagine, they didn't get killed. They fought back, and they fought well. So we just had this big explosion. Yeah, so the Ringos are riding through the Black Hills of the Laramie Mountains, right in the footprints of the Kellys and Larimers, who were just in this horrible situation. and they're about 2 weeks behind by the time they get there. And I want to read from July 28th, where they passed the site where the wagons were burned and bodies were later recovered. And it is kind of gloomy, but it sets up the next reading. So on July 29th, Mary Ringo wrote near the Deer Creek garrison. She said, about dark, Mr. Ravel went out to bring in his horses when a man shot him through the arm. In a short time, all lights were extinguished and every man to his post expecting to be attacked by Indians. But they could have been robbers. At this point, they're near the garrison. The army's everywhere. It's kind of an illogical conclusion, but they're afraid. And they lost 3 horses in that attack. So they are completely frightened and on edge, and everyone agrees starting from that moment, they're going to have all the men do double guard shifts all night as well. And that leads us to the worst day of Mary's life. The next reading, I think, is very relatable to women who have experienced some kind of a loss, where perhaps after this loss, people will tell us, just let it go. Just forget it. Just go home. She's told to turn back after the worst day of her life. She's told, it's better if you just turn around. And many times I think as we get older and more mature, we experience these events over and over, and we start to realize, I don't want to turn back. That determination really steels us to move forward, and we know we're capable of moving forward, even in the face of dire consequences. So for that, I'm so proud of her. 2 days after they are super skittish on their guard duties, her husband, on July 30th, accidentally discharged his gun, getting up early in the morning for his extra guard duty. He may have been tired, extra tired. And some researchers believe that it caught on his bootstrap or something, but fired through his head. So she was quite caught off guard, I imagine. But she wrote in such a relatable, sweet way. And now, oh God, comes the saddest record of my life. For this day, my husband accidentally shot himself and was buried by the wayside. And oh, my heart is breaking. If I had no children, how gladly would I lay me down with my dead. And I pray for the strength to raise our precious children.
Oh, that's heartbreaking to hear. Oh my gosh. And not even through Indian attack of accidental death. Oh, that must have been just heartrending for her and the family. So that's an added, I don't know, tragic dimension to the death.
Especially as the wagon master, you would think the wagon master would have it all together.
Well, yeah, so he is the wagon master, and I guess someone else would have had to have taken over that duty. I would imagine I'd just be plodding along in outer space if it were me.
That's a good point you bring up. No one reassumed that position. And I have to try and wonder, if I get into her head, did she ask for someone? Did she relinquish that? And I don't know if that's true. In her daughter's commentary on the journal, she said that she believed her mom was the bravest woman she ever heard of, and that even though the way to San Jose was rough, it was her sheer determination that she raised her family unaided. And so if we pull back with that sheer determination, what do we see? And in her writing, we see that from that day on, each day, one of the gentlemen of the train stepped in to help drive one of the wagons and stepped in to check in on her, how you doing? But she kept going, and that is impressive.
Well, it really is, because an instinct might be for anyone who lost someone that important to them is, I'm going to go home where my family is and people that I know, but no, she's going to keep going on into the unknown future, really. That is just an amazing story, an amazing woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's like, to see nothing ahead of you other than the other person's dream. But constantly we hear, even if it's a matter of after someone passes, maybe they had a planned vacation, but the family will rally together and they will take that vacation. Or maybe it's a place that they love and the family will take the ashes and distribute them there. So I think it might be something like that of, I'm going to keep living out my husband's dream, on and forward we go.
I'm leaving behind the old and going to the new.
She would have had to have some kind of buy-in for the trip. She would have had to go along with the diagnostic solutions. So maybe she had already come to terms with that's where the future is. Funny thing is, later on in life, and I know this is kind of a side note, but later on in life, Johnny Ringo is allegedly accused of killing Wyatt Earp's older brother, Virgil, and they have a personal vendetta, and it's rumored that maybe Wyatt shot him, or there's other hypotheses out there. But there's a fun little twist that later in life, they end up being pinned against each other.
Wow, what a great story, just to kind of pull together something with the Earp family and then this family, and then, of course, Mary, who I can only imagine wasn't exactly pleased with Johnny for what, because she was alive and she saw where her son was going. So, but who knows what she thought about this? She's one of those people who I wish there was a way to do an oral history with Mary Ringo.
Yeah, she did transcribe her diary 3 months before her death. So there was some kind of, maybe that same determination of, it's time, I need to preserve this, I've got to do something about this to leave that legacy. So maybe that resilience and that determination had that one last flicker.
She realized her diary had some historical relevance, value. The fact that she did just spoke to how important this journey was in their lives, probably more for family history in their mind, but in the end, it became history that we now can learn.
Definitely put a pin in that for one of the other questions of things to learn. If you are a family historian, and that means maybe you're just currently writing a diary, or maybe you're the one researching, there is, like you said, Leslie, realized value. We don't know what our story is necessarily worth now. And even for Mary, they didn't know how important this was on a grand scale. But I want to remind those who are researching or doing their genealogy and such to preserve in a bigger scale if they can, or if the documentation that they have gets passed to a historical society or a museum and such, please release them to reprint it and republish it after you're gone, because we want it. We don't know what that value is until later, unfortunately. Make sure that maybe for now it's private in your generation, but by the next generation, can we please expand?
Sometimes, especially with, Indigenous stories and stories of people of color, there can really be aspersions cast on their story. And perhaps it's an opportunity to say, no, wait a minute, that's not my family history. Here's my family history.
Yes,
and to, I guess you could say, correct that history. I think that's of great value.
2 points in her writing that they're just teachable moments, I think, in culture and perspective I hope to share. So the first one is, what did the women do in their leisure time? Mary Ringo, when she was held up trying to cross the river from the South Platte to the North Platte, she was held up for 14 days and she started writing things like, I'm bored, which is, normal. And so in her boredom, she wrote on June 28th, I'm getting very tired of lying by, so I made myself a bonnet. I thought that was quite resourceful. Let's start making clothing. And then the next day, she cut herself fabric for a dress, and she decided, I'm going to try and make one this week.
Wow.
First off, I can't make a dress in 900 days, much like a week.
And that's with a sewing machine.
Also, what are you doing with a new dress on the trail? What?
Yeah. And a new bonnet. Maybe her old bonnet wore out with the sun. I don't know, but no, she's not going to just sit around and stare at the clouds. That woman's going to stay busy. And that's also with 5 kids.
So the other important moment that I picked up on was at the end of her story, as she was walking up a hill and then down a hill into a canyon. They were approaching Austin, Nevada, where they had a 2-week layover. And we know she's late stage pregnancy. No accommodations are being made for her. So she goes into labor on October 6th, and she had just finished coming out of this canyon. 2 days later, between 2 and 10 days later, it's a mystery, she gives birth to a stillborn boy who I'm going to nickname Austin because he was born around there. And when he was born, he was considered severely disfigured. And so that's not entirely unusual, but the point that stood out to me is that she and her children attributed the stillbirth and the disfiguration to her mental health because of watching her husband die and the grief associated with it. Her child consequently came out this way. And that is a very, very, very old belief. That's actually an Aristotelian concept that a woman's mental health or emotional state can actually transform, mangle, or kill her own child. And no one considered, how about walking six hours a day, being fully pregnant?
Yes.
There's all these biological factors. We'll never know.
Yeah, I don't know how to frame that. There's a bit of misogyny maybe going on. I don't know. It's the woman's fault if she hadn't had these feelings. But I don't know how the family and her, I hope she didn't have any guilt, but I wonder, if I hadn't have felt this way, the baby would still be alive. But then we don't know.
Those beliefs persisted until the early 1900s, and that type of situation happened to land women wives in insane asylums if their children were born with issues, noticeable physical issues. They would take a stay in an asylum for potentially being part of it or contributor to it. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah, it really is. And it just strikes me, I don't know, just the woman's fault, woman's frailty, hysterical. We know where that term came from. So, yeah. And so one more thing for Mary to deal with in this life of hers. Mm-hmm. So she didn't have a supporting partner to ease her through this new grief of this stillborn child. And so, again, I'm just aghast at this woman who soldiered on. Right. She didn't just lay down and die. And she said that's because she had children. I don't know if she really would have done that, but she kept right on going. This has been a really interesting story, Janelle. I'm so glad that you have shared this with me, with our viewers. And you had mentioned, I thought, a really interesting place that people can go for research. You called it Paper Trail?
Yeah, it's paper-trail.org. They specifically are a repository of trail diaries or trail diary manifests. So they take the diary and they analyze who was in it, every name mentioned, every location mentioned. And as a fair disclaimer, they are very literal. So if they mention Mr. Davies, it's just written down as Mr. Davies. You don't know who Mr. Davies is unless you go do further research. But you're able to say within parameters who was on the trail between this time and that time, narrow it down, and you can get the manifests. And then from there, go get the diaries, and from there overlap the stories. So it really brings that well-rounded 360-degree view of what your ancestor was experiencing.
Wow, what a great resource. And in fact, I'm thinking about, where I work at the American Heritage Center, we administrate the Wyoming History Day program. And so that could be a great resource, I'm thinking, for younger students, would you say?
It is very user friendly to navigate. So even I would say middle school and up, it would be a fabulous place to go. Even randomly pick someone who went on the trail and tell me about them.
Oh,
Cool way to
love
bring
that.
that to life.
Well, do you have anything you want to add? This has been a great interview, but I want to give you the last word.
If there is anything else I could say beside expanding your potential distribution of your family's legacy, is that when you're exploring, expand the research like I did to overlap tales. Maybe it is a neighbor, maybe it's someone in the same church or club or like Freemasons or such. Even your focus person, your family members, business partners, and see what you can find on them because they have something to say about your family member. And, we think of who we are and I'm this person and our legacy will be totally contained to that perspective, but other people think we're different. And so for the last words, I really want to say it is worth digging for because you just may strike gold.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Janelle, for this great interview. And I'm going to look for your books. I bet our viewers will too.
Thank you so much, Leslie. It was a pleasure.